Agenda for today, you're going to read a text, answer some multiple choice, continue to work on your same open response assignment from yesterday. Text for today is about a woman named Genevieve Grotian and her contributions to the United States of America during World War II. Genevieve was what's called a cryptanalyst, or in more basic terms, a code breaker. So during World War II, the United States and Japan were on opposite sides. And Genevieve's role here was when the Japanese military were sending long distance communications to one another, they would do so using secret code so that their messages were not understood by other countries and by their enemies. The United States would listen in on these communications and intercept the code. Genevieve's role was to take that code that they intercepted and translate it, figure out what the math was behind the code, and translate it into an understandable message. And you can imagine if that message were, say, about the time and location of a future attack, her translation of that code could help save tons and tons of American lives. So, as you're reading the text today, similar thinking task to yesterday, be considering how the author shows the importance of cryptanalysts or code breakers to the United States war efforts. Again, you're going to have a couple of footnotes that you can follow as you read the text to help you define unfamiliar words. So remember that when you're using the footnotes, there's a tiny little number next to a word. That same tiny little number will be in the notes section at the very bottom of your text. So you scroll down to the bottom, look up what that word means in the notes, and then go right back to that word and continue from where you were reading. A few new words to know as you're reading this article today. Number one is the verb to peer. To peer at somebody is like to stare at them with a lot of focus, and you're doing it kind of a little bit secretly. Number two, this word interval. An interval is the space between two things. It's frequently used referring to the amount of time that passes between two events or items in a pattern. And finally, the word pact. When two sides make a pact, that's an agreement. So if you make a pact, you're making an agreement. Some strategies as you are reading if you come across other unfamiliar words. First one is use your context clues, right? And what that means is to use all the words around the word you're not sure about to figure out what that word means. My example here is I zorned over the fence, right? Obviously zorned is not a word in the English language, but by reading this little phrase, we can actually figure out its definition pretty easily, right? If we eliminate that word we don't know, zorned, and substitute a word we do know in its place that would make sense. For example, I jumped over the fence, or I hopped over the fence, right? Then we have a pretty good guess for what that word zorned actually means, jumped or hopped. Another strategy is to break down the word, right? Words often come in parts, and each part has its own meaning. The example here, unbelievable, the prefix un, which means not, the word believe in the middle, which means to think something is true, and able, which means like you can do something, right? So if you put it all together, not able to believe something, like I can't think that thing is true, then we've put all those puzzle pieces together. And the last tool is your dictionary, right? Either English to English or English to Spanish, whatever you find more helpful. Multiple choice is going to have a few different question types today. First, you're going to be finding the meaning or definition of words in context of the article. Um, so be careful on this. The word that you're asked to define may not mean what it usually does in other contexts. You'll really have to look at how it's used in the article to figure out its meaning for this question. You're going to be asked to provide evidence for some of the questions, for some of your answers to questions. So picking out a piece of text that proves your answer to the prior question is true. You're going to be asked the central idea of the text. You're going to be asked to summarize some of the information in the text and some of the relationships between things mentioned in the text. And also, you'll be asked about the author's purpose for writing the text or for including specific pieces of the reading, and what those pieces of the reading's purpose is in terms of the overall structure of the text. Strategies for answering multiple choice. We've gone over these, but a quick run through again. Step one, you want to break down the question, really identify very precisely exactly what the question is asking you and what the answer will have to provide in terms of information to completely answer the question correctly. Once you know exactly what the question's asking and what you're looking for, a lot of times you won't know the right answer right away, but you will be able to identify one or two answers that are clearly wrong. This step of eliminating clearly wrong answers is called slash the trash. Once you've narrowed your options down to a couple, you want to look for answers that are distracting because they're partially correct, but not completely correct. Maybe the prompt is asking you to identify two things and it identifies one of them correctly. Once you've labeled distractors, you can choose the best answer, and that will often get you a really strong performance on multiple choice. Because we're still continuing our open response from yesterday, we'll give a quick refresher on the background from yesterday's text. Text for today talks about events that happened in both World War I as well as World War II. Specifically, it explores the role of Native American soldiers in the US military and their contributions during that time. One thing that was really important for countries and their militaries to be able to do was to communicate to each other from a long distance without that communication being listened in on or understood by their enemies. Imagine if you were giving away the location of a secret army base, you couldn't have the enemy understand your communication, otherwise they would know where that secret base was and the soldiers there would no longer be safe. Native American soldiers at that time possessed the ability to communicate with each other in their native language, which was not understood by anyone except them, right? Any countries in Europe or Asia would not be familiar with Native American languages and dialects. So they were really, really important and really effective in creating what eventually amounted to a secret code, but to them was just speaking their native language, and that increased the safety of American soldiers significantly throughout those two wars. These Native American soldiers became known as the code talkers because of their unique ability to communicate with American military groups all around the world and never have their communication be understood by enemies. As you're reading the text today, be thinking about how the author demonstrates the importance of these code talkers. What writing techniques and tricks does the author use to help us really understand their importance? Open response prompt for today. How does the author show the importance of the code talkers to the war efforts? Again, when we're looking at how the author does something, we're thinking back to that author's toolkit. Now, this toolkit will look a little bit different for nonfiction than it did for poetry, but some of them will remain the same. First item in their toolkit, again, is language. This could be descriptive language or the connotations or word choice that they choose to describe things. Second item in their toolkit is structure. They're communicating different things based on whether they organize the text in chronological order versus with a cause and effect or compare contrast type structure. Third thing is text features. These are pictures, headers, graphs, maps that they include. And lastly is just the events and information that they do or don't include in the article play a really big role in determining what our point of view towards the thing they're talking about ends up being. In terms of structure, you are going to be writing a full 4-paragraph essay response to this prompt, remembering that your first paragraph is really just your thesis statement. Body 1 after that and body 2, both of those in the typical format of topic, context, evidence, analysis, conclusion, and then wrap it up with a conclusion paragraph. Thinking about the steps you're going to have to take to be successful on this prompt. First, you should go to the Google Classroom and in the assignment for today, open up the PDF copy of the text as well as the Google Doc where you're going to be submitting this open response. Once you've got those two items open, you can move on to planning or outlining your writing. As you plan or outline, I recommend using a template with similar structure to the one you see on the right. And as you'll notice, the first thing on this template is crafting your thesis statement. Some CFS for writing quality thesis statements. When you're taking an essay prompt and using that to create your thesis statement, you always want to do something that's called turning the question around. So you start out with a question that the prompt is asking you. You then sort of turn that question around into a statement rather than a question. So an example prompt could be, how does online learning differ from in-person learning? In order to turn the question around here, I'm going to eliminate the question words, how does, and then twist the wording of the remaining prompt into a statement rather than question form. So it could look like online learning differs from in-person learning because blah, blah, blah. Next thing you want to make sure is that your thesis statement answers all parts of the prompt. Oftentimes an essay prompt will have multiple different little questions within it that it's asking you. You want to make sure your thesis statement gives a complete response in your thesis sentence to all parts of that. So for example, if my prompt was, what is your favorite and least favorite vegetable and why? I'm breaking down that prompt and noticing all the different parts that I have to respond to. So the first thing I have to respond to is what my favorite vegetable is. The second thing is why that's my favorite. Third thing I have to respond to is what my least favorite vegetable is. Fourth thing, why that's my least favorite. If I don't answer all 4 of those pieces in my thesis statement, then I have written an incomplete thesis that left some parts of the prompt unanswered. Lastly, your thesis statement should function as a preview for your body paragraph topic sentences, right? It's basically a roadmap for what the structure of your essay is going to be after the thesis. So in my thesis response to the prompt about vegetables, I could write the best vegetable is broccoli because it looks like a tree, and the worst is lettuce because it tastes like nothing, right? So I see the first piece of my thesis statement here, the best vegetable is broccoli because it looks like a tree. I identify that as basically the roadmap for my body paragraph 1 topic sentence. I can say broccoli is the best vegetable because it resembles a tree. Then I see pretty clearly that the second piece of my thesis statement, the worst is lettuce because it tastes like nothing, could function as the preview of my body paragraph 2 topic sentence, which could be lettuce is the worst vegetable because it has no taste. Right? So I've designed a pretty clear preview or roadmap for my body paragraphs in my single sentence thesis statement. So you've got a thesis statement, the structure of which is similar to the sentence stem you see in the thesis box there. And then you use that as your roadmap to provide yourself two really strong topic sentences, one for each body paragraph. And then really go through the text and find a strong piece of evidence to support each claim, both the one in the claim for body paragraph 1 and for body paragraph 2. Once you've got yourself all planned and outlined, you're ready to actually type up a draft of your essay. Once you've typed up a draft, go through and edit it for any grammar mistakes, any spelling errors, run-on sentences, be looking to add punctuation, things like that. Once you're really happy with the finished product, you can submit your work.